Yeah, so I think obviously, I suppose it's like with all these subjects and so on, you can say so much and so on. I can speak about everything that they got wrong. No, I'm joking. It'll take all night. No, but so I'm just going to make 3 points, I think, to summarize it all. The first thing, obviously, on both sides, my in-laws and my parents, they're right at the end of raising children, more or less. I know Kath and Karen are almost done studying and I suppose want to get married and so on, but they have the result, I suppose, of godly parenting. And this year, in December, we went away with my parents, and in June and July we went away with my in-laws and so on. And in both occasions I've actually got on my phone, I've got a screensaver that changes every hour and so on, and I put on memories of all different stuff, like when we went overseas, and all nice photos I like, so I can be reminded. But 2 photos that often rotate is when we were on holiday over there, a photo we took, and then when we were walking on the beach in Cape Town, in the Cape and so on. And what just was so beautiful to me is as a result of all these parentings, and I'm sure we were challenges, and there were times you guys didn't know what you're doing, and we'll be the same, and so on. But the result of it is we've got such a beautiful family. As in December, we were walking in the Cape on the beach, and Rebecca's part of the family, and there's just beautiful peace and unity, and we're all joking, and life isn't easy, we still got our complications, but it's as a result of having consistent parents in our lives. And then again, we were walking there on the golf course in June, and so on, and we're a beautiful family. Now I'm part of their family, and as a result of good, constant parenting and applying all of these principles and so on. So I suppose what I just want to bring across as a first point is the product is beautiful, and so on. And I'm sharing that from, and I mean that sincerely. So obviously I'm grateful to both parents, but it does work, and so on. And then the second thing is, I suppose now speaking from my parents' side, is unconditional love. And I got a few hidings, quite hectic hidings, as you've heard my dad explain them, and so on, and so on. But what made my childhood beautiful is I always belonged, and I never ever had fear in my life. If I look back, it was because of this unconditional love, and that love, I suppose. I just want to encourage us, I suppose, is to really love our children as was shared. And loving, if I remember the times, I've got to often tell Rebecca of memories and so on. But I remember times like, I remember we went on a motorbike ride one Sunday afternoon, and I sat with my dad there at the Vaal. And it's a pretty sketchy place because it's a Vaal, and we ate bananas. I don't know, I just remember that clearly. It wasn't sweets. But on a Sunday we went for a nice ride together, and he had packed a snack, and we sat there on the little tree stump eating bananas and so on. And there's those moments that were really beautiful. I remember when my dad brought the first Pelican home, but it didn't have sights at all. Even the open sights were broken off. So we stuck with, I think, Pratley glue, a piece of a screwdriver on the end for the V of the open sights. I don't know how accurate it was. And then we shot our first bird, and I cried. So I wasn't much of a man, and so on. And on the other side, I've often told Rebecca how my mom used to read to me for hours, the Enid Blytons and the Bible. And these small things I remember, they were so beautiful. I remember it's interesting that my dad said that a few times today. We'd get to sections of the book of Acts in the New Testament, they're obviously storybooks, and she would tell me how much my dad loved Paul and Peter. She used to say, we're going to read this story, and man, Dad likes Paul. So already those things, and those are the beautiful moments of love And it's that time and all those things everyone shared. And I suppose from my perspective, I want to encourage us to spend those real moments with your children, because that brings a security. I knew that I had parents that were there for me and loved me, and so on. And so on. And then, sorry, I'm almost done. And the last thing, I can't tell you the importance of church. I remember I had a moment at varsity where I made lots of friends after the first 6 months, and I'd speak lots about my life, and they'd speak lots about my life. And the one day that my one friend Daniel said to me, "Yes, you have a big family, because you speak about all these uncles and aunts." And I'm like, they're not my family actually. It's Uncle Quentin, Uncle Steph, Uncle Joa, all these people, Gerardus, that I'd met and had huge impact on my life. And church, I remember, like when my dad had cancer, I remember Uncle Steph taking me to swimming. I remember Uncle Steph actually once picking me up from a haircut, because that's how my dad was. He obviously, if I walked out and Uncle Steph was like, "I'm taking you home," I'm like, "Oh, didn't even know that you were there." And that's at the spiritual side. But man, it's church played a role in my life, and it was those role models that I looked at. And then the last thing, obviously it feels like I have to say this, but I look back and your discipline was important in my life. And I remember small things. Obviously it was discipline when I lied and that. But I remember once, I don't know if my dad remembered, but I got into such trouble because I never helped the cricket coach pack up the cricket stuff, because I was the last person to leave the cricket training. And that thing stuck by me forever. I don't know if that's the only time he really hit me without speaking. He hit me with I had a small cricket bat, just one shot quickly, but I was already older, like grade 7 or 6. But that stuck with me. I remember when I went to work, I would always finish a task, and I did pretty well in an article, although it's only articling and so on. But those discipline points, man, they've stuck out in my life. And obviously the hidings of when I can't remember the hidings I got really for lying and so on. But I remember those small things, and I'm super grateful for it, because that discipline has filtered into every part of my life now, and so on. And I suppose as a parent, I can imagine, because I look at our little kid only on a Sona now, and this crazy love starts coming up in your heart, and I'm sure there's about. And I imagine disciplining, as was shared, is a lot of effort, and it's not fun and so on. But I look at it in hindsight, now going through it all, it really played a very, very important role in my life.
I just wrote down a few very unrelated points that stuck out for me from my childhood. Firstly, I don't know if this is my personality as well, but I think it had a lot to do with parenting, is the concept of the discipline being quick and immediate and over, and then there being love. I never remember feeling guilty for very long at all. I mean, I distinctly remember having a moment after getting a hiding and being like, I was actually bad. So I remember having those moments where I had to actually genuinely repent, but I never remember feeling guilty as a child. And as an adult, it's quite amazing, condemnation isn't something I actually struggle with, even with the Lord now, because I had such beautiful parents who modeled what God is like to me. So when I mess up now, but it might also be a bit of my personality, but it's easy to freely accept forgiveness from God, and to not live in condemnation, because that was so well modeled to me through my parents. So that was something that I think stuck out. Another thing that I really loved about my childhood, which was mentioned, but just to place emphasis on, was that my parents always, I suppose, it was one of the first things I was talked about, that calling on our lives. My parents always saw or treated us like we had a calling from when we were young. So if your friend was sick, you can pray for them. Did you ask your friend if you can pray for them? Or if you're at church and you can share a verse, you can do that, and you're not ever too young to serve the Lord, and you're not too young to be involved. Like you actually have a ministry too, even as a child. And I remember loving feeling part of the team. Like often we would have people over, and then my parents would say like, okay, you need to help clean up the table now so that we can talk to these people. They're here from church and they've come to talk to us, so can you please help clean up afterwards so that we can talk to them? And then you feel part of serving God with your parents, if that makes sense, which I loved a lot. And I think that responsibility to serve the Lord, and was in my heart from a young age, and that you have a role and you're important. And then as I was a teenager, one of the things that stuck out, I think, with my parents was that I don't think I was like a rebellious teenager, but I think I was difficult in that I argued a lot with my dad. But I was so grateful to him, because what happened was I went to like a very liberal school. Well, liberal in some ways, conservative in other ways. It was Anglican, but anyway, confused. So I got exposed to like a lot of like feminism and very liberal teachers who I had a lot of respect for. They were good teachers as well. Like my history teacher was awesome, but also an atheist and a huge feminist and that sort of thing. And I really struggled with a lot of things, but because my parents had raised me in an environment where there was so much love, like I was always at the dinner table able to say like, this was discussed, and then my dad would be like, okay, but we don't actually believe that. And then there was like that environment to debate it almost out. And I don't think I always necessarily immediately agreed with my dad, but at the end of the day, it really formed me. And when I got to university, it was actually amazing, because I felt like I'd already formed so many of my own opinions and convictions in serving the Lord, which I'm grateful happened to be the same as what my parents were. But because they allowed that space, and they didn't just say like, no, we don't do that, because no, it was, as I got older, they really helped me to form my own convictions. And even down to things like, linking to what you shared now about the whole boyfriend thing, even down to that, and convictions about modesty and even all of those things. It was never just like no as I got older. It was explained, and I really am grateful that my parents developed my own convictions, because then when I left home, it was a lot easier to leave home and to function at university. You weren't suddenly confronted with having to decide for yourself. And then the last thing was, but I think these are lots of girl things, so if you have girls, my dad was always willing to be the bad guy for me, which I was so grateful for. Like even if we discussed something, and then like, for instance, I wasn't allowed to wear a bikini, and then my parents we discussed that, and I did agree, but also if I got to like a social situation, I often got asked why I was wearing a full costume, then I was allowed to default to, like, my dad doesn't let me do that. Even if I understood why, my dad was allowed to be the bad guy for me, which was such a like safe place, especially if you're a girl.